My name is Emily. I'm 28 years old. The sound I remember most is not shouting, not a slammed door, not a glass breaking. It was the hard little crack of Caleb's phone hitting the kitchen counter harder than it needed to. Not thrown, not smashed, just put down with the kind of force a good man uses when he is trying very hard not to become a worse one. The ceramic fruit bowl rattled. One orange rolled, hit the side, and settled. The screen was still glowing. My engagement ring felt strangely heavy on my hand. Outside the window, our cul-de-sac looked aggressively normal. White mailboxes, trim hedges, a woman in black leggings walking a golden retriever past the HOA flower beds like nothing ugly had ever happened on that street in its life. Inside, the air smelled like reheated coffee, lemon cleaner, and printer ink. As I had spent that morning wiping down the table because we were supposed to choose invitation wording. We were supposed to argue about fonts, about envelopes, about whether joyfully request the honor of your presence sounded too formal for people who had seen both of us in sweatpants at Costco. Instead, Caleb turned the phone toward me, and there I was, kissing another man, except I had never kissed that man. Below that were screenshots of messages I had never sent. Then a medical document with my name on it. Then a PDF suggesting I had lied about fertility issues. Then another file implying I had been taking money from a shared account I had never touched. At the bottom was the email that delivered all of it. No real name, no signature, just attachments, and a subject line. You deserve the truth before you marry her. For a second, my body knew before my mind did. My fingertips went cold, my chest tightened, my jaw locked. Because what hit me first was not the accusation. It was the design, clean formatting, respectable fonts, measured wording, the careful tone of false concern, that civilized little voice people use when they want to ruin you without sounding vulgar. That part I recognized instantly. My parents had spent my whole life making cruelty look responsible. Caleb kept both hands flat on the counter. He was a trial attorney, not theatrical, not loud. When he got upset, he got quieter. That scared me more than anger would have. Tell me these are fake, he said. I looked again. The kissing photo was built from an old holiday charity event 3 years earlier. I knew the dress, I knew the lighting. Yeah, I even knew the angle of my head. Someone had cut another body into the frame and hoped emotion would do the rest. The fake messages used a nickname I had never once used. The medical form had the wrong clinic logo. Small mistakes. Not random mistakes. Rushed mistakes. The kind people make when they think panic will beat scrutiny. They're fake, I said. Caleb looked at me, not furious, not yet, wounded, trying to be fair, trying not to become a man who either wrongly abandoned his fiancée or wrongly defended a liar. Emily, he said, I need more than that. The microwave beeped behind us, a stupid domestic sound from a version of the day that had already died. I swallowed. Give me 72 hours. His eyes narrowed. Why 72? Because if I start defending myself right now, it's going to sound like panic. I need proof. He looked back at the phone, then at me. Do you know who sent it? I did not answer immediately. I thought of my mother's handwriting on birthday cards. Perfect loops, no softness. I thought of my father smiling through his teeth at our engagement dinner when Caleb mentioned we were thinking about buying a house 2 counties over. I thought of my mother asking whether my future last name meant I would finally stop borrowing identity from the family that raised me. I looked at Caleb. I know the style. Something in his face shifted. Not relief. Recognition. Your parents? I nodded once, and saying it out loud did not feel dramatic. It felt like naming weather. He stepped back. Not far. Just enough for the distance to hurt. Emily, if you're wrong, you're accusing your parents of trying to destroy your life. I held his gaze. If I'm right, they already are. That landed between us. He rubbed a hand over his mouth and looked down at the forged PDF again. 72 hours, he said. Not comfort, not trust, exactly. A deadline. I nodded. Don't call them, I said. Don't answer the sender. Don't tell anyone yet. And if it turns out to be real, then you leave. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something that was kind enough to hurt. I'm not going to punish you for evidence I haven't tested. After he left for work, I stood alone in that kitchen with burnt coffee in the microwave and lemon polish still drying on the table. I thought I would cry first. I didn't. That surprised me. I sat down with my laptop, opened every file, started taking screenshots, forwarded the email into a separate folder. Then I began listing errors the way a teacher marks up a paper they're offended by on principle. Wrong clinic header. Outdated insurance format. Timestamps that didn't match. Message bubbles inconsistent with current iPhone layout. A lab result naming a doctor who had retired in 2021. By noon, I had 6 inconsistencies. By 1:30, I had 10. At 2, I found the detail that changed everything. The forged medical document used an old address, not my current one, not even my last apartment, an address from when I was 19. The year I had a real gynecology appointment after a cyst scare so painful I'd let my mother drive me because I was doubled over and still stupid enough to confuse being managed with being cared for. But I stared at that address for a long time. Then I leaned back in my chair and looked up at the ceiling fan turning above me. Nobody else would have had that file. Nobody. That was not a guess. That was math. My mother kept everything. Folders, passwords, insurance cards, old prescriptions, tax returns, school records, church donation letters, every scrap of paper that could later be used to define me. When I was 16, she intercepted a summer program acceptance letter because she didn't want me leaving home too early. When I was 22, she told a boyfriend from Chapel Hill that I had attachment instability and needed more family support than marriage would allow. When I was 24, she called a former supervisor after I applied for a job in Atlanta and said she was concerned I was emotionally overextended after my grandmother died. Every sabotage arrived dressed like concern. Every leash came gift-wrapped. Every theft of my autonomy was explained as love. The only reason Caleb had lasted this long without them getting inside the walls was because I had learned to hide parts of my life. Or I thought I had. I called the one person I knew would believe me without requiring tears, softness, or a court-quality closing statement. Nora, my college roommate, cybersecurity consultant, sharp enough to be rude usefully. She answered on the third ring. Why do you sound like a hostage trying to sound normal? My parents sent Caleb forged evidence to end the engagement. Silence, then a long exhale. I'm coming over, she said. Don't touch anything else. She arrived 40 minutes later with iced Starbucks, a portable hard drive, 2 charging cables, and the expression of a woman who already suspected arson but was willing to begin with smoke. She sat at my kitchen table and went to work, opened the files on a clean machine, pulled headers, checked embedded data, clicked through creation histories. She was quiet for a long time, which with Nora was never a bad sign. It meant she was too annoyed to waste words. Finally, she pointed at the screen. Whoever made these is not competent enough to be smug, which is good news for us. Can you trace them? Maybe. Burner email, probably, but people leave fingerprints everywhere. Export paths, cloud syncs, autofill habits, shared printers, bad file hygiene. Then she zoomed in. Mom, look at this. The PDF creation metadata had not been fully scrubbed. Buried in the embedded file path was an internal name. D_Harrison_event edit final 2. I felt my pulse jump. Not because Harrison was rare, because Harrison was my mother's maiden name, and the one she still used in passwords whenever she thought she was being subtle. Nora looked at me. You need legal cover before you do anything emotional. She was right. I knew exactly who to call. Not a cousin, not a family friend, not someone who would ask if I was sure in that careful voice people use when they really mean, "Are you overreacting?" I called Martin Keene. He had handled my grandfather's estate, several property transfers, and a trust my parents liked to mention vaguely whenever they wanted gratitude from me without transparency. But I had not spoken to him in almost 2 years because my mother hated when I talked to anyone who knew paperwork better than she did. He picked up after one ring. "Emily, I need help," I said, "and I need discretion." "Come to my office," he said. "Bring everything. Do not confront them yet." "You believe me?" He paused. Then very calmly, he said, "I believe your parents are capable of administrative violence." It was such a precise phrase I almost laughed. Instead, I grabbed my keys. Martin's office sat 3 blocks from the county courthouse, above a title company, and across from a diner with faded patriotic bunting in the windows year-round. The building smelled like dust, copy toner, and old carpet cleaner. The waiting area had fake ficus plants and a bowl of peppermints nobody ever touched. He took me straight into his office, closed the blinds, and read every file in silence. He didn't interrupt, didn't perform sympathy, didn't soften the truth to make it more digestible. When he finished, he removed his glasses and set them carefully on the desk. "This is ugly," he said. "I know." He shook his head. "No, I mean strategically ugly." He tapped the old address on the forged medical form. "This came from restricted personal material. That means one of 3 things. Records were unlawfully retained, your accounts or mail were accessed, or someone with prior access supplied old protected information." That sounds criminal. It can be. Then he opened a drawer and pulled out a thin folder. My name was printed on the tab. Emily Russo. Trust supplement/age and marital status conditions. Something in my stomach dropped so fast it felt physical. "What is that?" He hesitated. Not because he was hiding it, because he had probably spent years waiting for the right moment and hated that this was it. "Something I have told your parents more than once they needed to disclose." My voice came out flat. "Read it." He slid the folder toward me. The trust had been established by my grandfather. Not a dynasty-level fortune, not movie money, but enough. Commercial property income, 2 investment accounts, a scheduled distribution structure beginning at 30, earlier release under certain conditions. One of those conditions was marriage, legal marriage, independent household formation. And then the language I had never been shown. Parental co-management provisions. I looked up so fast my chair made a noise. "Oh, co-management?" Martin folded his hands. "After your grandfather died, your parents inserted an amendment. If you remained unmarried and financially dependent within certain advisory structures, they retained oversight on portions of the distribution pipeline." That is not a sentence normal people speak. "It means," he said quietly, "that marriage reduced their control." "How much control?" "Enough to matter to people who prize control over peace." I stared back down at the paper. My whole life, my parents treated me like I was bad with money. Too soft, too trusting, too emotional, too reactive. And somehow, mysteriously, I was never given a clean view of what was legally tied to my own name. They tried to stop the wedding because I'd become harder to manage. Martin didn't answer. He didn't need to. And the room had gone so quiet I could hear the buzz from the overhead light. Then he said, "There's more." Of course there was. There always is when people like my parents are involved. One cruelty is never alone. It needs accounting. He opened another file. Property transfers, short-term loans against trust-adjacent assets, collateralization, patchwork liquidity moves, a private line of credit, money being shifted in ways I had never been told about, not necessarily illegal yet, but unstable, and suddenly the whole shape of it stood up. They didn't just need me unmarried, they needed me manageable, dependent, unclear, potentially unstable in the eyes of others. Something public enough to justify private control. I looked at him. So they needed me unmarried, financially blurry, and easy to discredit. Martin said nothing. His silence was answer enough. By the time I got back to my car, the late afternoon sun was hitting windshields hard enough to sting my eyes. Someone across the street was arguing about a parking meter. A teenager in a Walmart vest was loading groceries into a trunk. The ordinary world kept moving. Mine had turned into a filing system with teeth. That night, Caleb came home carrying takeout and the cautious look of a man who knew the floor under him had already shifted once that day and might do it again. We sat at the kitchen table under the pendant light we had picked together at Home Depot because it looked expensive enough to fake adulthood. The memory of us laughing about that made something in me ache. I handed him a packet. "Read before you speak." He did. And I watched every change cross his face, suspicion dissolving, concentration sharpening, anger, disgust, something like shame. When he finished, he set the papers down very carefully. "Your parents did this." "Yes. And they may have been monitoring you for years." "Yes." He stood, paced once, stopped behind his chair and gripped it. "I should have trusted you faster." I looked at him. "You trusted evidence." He shook his head. "You were asking me to believe something horrifying over polished documents sent by your future in-laws. I hate that those were the terms." I appreciated that. Not the apology, the honesty. False reassurance would have made me lonelier. "I don't need perfect," I said. "I need steady." He looked at me. Then he nodded. Then let's be steady." That sentence held me together longer than he probably knows. The next 48 hours became a careful sprint. Nora kept tracing technical slips. Martin started chain of custody documentation. Caleb brought in a private investigator his firm sometimes used for witness location work and corporate verification messes. And I did the one thing my parents would never expect from me. I performed weakness. I called my mother, let my voice shake. "Can we talk?" She did not even bother pretending surprise. "Of course, sweetheart, I've been worried." That word. Worried. The Swiss Army knife of controlling women. It can cut, pry, guilt, and restrain all at once. We met the next morning at a boutique coffee place she liked because the cups were minimalist, the music was soft. And the staff always remembered her order. She arrived in a cream blazer, gold cross necklace, and the expression of a woman already preparing to look graceful under pressure she had personally created. "You look pale," she said. "I haven't slept." "I can imagine." She reached across the table and touched my hand. I let her. Sometimes you learn more by not jerking away. "Caleb got an email," I said. She lowered her eyes, that prayer-adjacent move she used whenever she wanted to look pained, righteous, and tasteful all at once. "Your father and I had hoped the situation would not become so ugly." My whole body went still. Not because I was surprised, because there it was, the little confession tucked inside the performance. "What situation?" She realized it a beat late, then recovered. "Emily, please." Thus a mother knows when something is wrong. "You sent him those files." "We shared concerns." "You forged documents." She sat back, offended now. "Watch your tone." There it was. When truth got too close, she always reached for etiquette like it was a weapon blessed by God. "You don't understand how vulnerable young women can be before marriage," she said. "Men look stable until they aren't. Families deserve transparency." I looked at her. "So you invented transparency." "We protected you." "From my own wedding?" Her eyes sharpened. "From permanent mistakes." And there it was. Not even hidden anymore. No real concern about infidelity, no heartbreak, no maternal agony. Just control, dressed in tasteful language and served with frothed milk. I felt my eyes sting. That part wasn't hard. Not because I was acting. Because some griefs sit very close to the surface when you are across from the person who caused them. He may leave, I said quietly. My mother softened in a way that should have felt comforting. Instead, it chilled me. Then perhaps it's better this happened before vows made things complicated. Complicated, meaning legal, meaning public, meaning harder to control. I nodded as if I were crumbling. She leaned closer. Come home for a few days. Let your father and me help you think. What she meant was isolate. What she meant was absorb me back into the house where every story could be managed, where my confusion could be encouraged, where my reality could be sanded down until it became convenient. Maybe, I said. She smiled, not warmly. Triumph always looked neat on her. Good girl. For one sharp second, as I wanted to slap the coffee out of her hand. Instead, I lowered my eyes and whispered, Please don't tell anyone yet. She patted my wrist. We would never humiliate you. That was the thing about my parents. They believed two impossible things at once, that they were smarter than everyone, and that manners erased motive. We used both. Caleb and I quietly let a few relatives know the invitation mailing was being delayed. We did not explain why. We did not accuse anyone. We simply loosened the air. My mother rushed in to fill it exactly the way women like her always do when they sense scandal and audience in the same room. She called my Aunt Linda. She called the chair of the Women's Prayer Council at church. She texted the bridal shower host. And then she adopted the posture of a mother carrying a burden she was too dignified to describe directly. By the end of that day, 3 people had reached out to ask if I was doing okay, in the soft, pitying tone that means they have already heard a version of you that should insult everybody involved. Suffocation can happen in a suburb. It smells like candles, lipstick, and gossip. Then the middle of it all hit. Nora found something huge, and then we nearly lost it. A print log from the private administrative office at the country club where my father served on the finance committee. One of the forged PDFs had been printed there before being rescanned and emailed. The timestamp matched the document creation window almost exactly. But before we could secure a statement, the office manager suddenly stopped cooperating. Wouldn't meet. Hey, wouldn't confirm. Wouldn't answer follow-ups. Someone had gotten to her. By afternoon, Caleb's investigator learned my father had visited the club that morning. Then my Aunt Linda called me, furious in that breathless, sanctimonious way people get when they think they're protecting the family by helping it lie better. Your mother is beside herself, she said. She says you're spiraling and blaming them for your own choices. I stood in the hallway holding my phone and stared at the wall. What choices? A beat of silence. Then the coward's army arrived. Emily, there are things people are saying. People. Always people. The faceless choir cowards hide behind when they want to bruise you without owning the bruise. Later that evening, Caleb got a call from his older brother, not to accuse me, to warn him. Was apparently my father had hinted there were stability concerns in my medical history and that Caleb should think carefully before tying himself legally to volatility. Volatility. I was in our bedroom folding towels when Caleb told me. For one terrible second, shame flooded me anyway. That is what long-term manipulation does to you. Even when evidence is stacked on your side of the table, part of you still wants to apologize for being easy to misdescribe. Caleb saw it happen. He took the towel gently out of my hands and set it aside. Then he touched my face. Do not make their lie easier by looking ashamed of it. I looked at him. He held my gaze. This ends because they end it, he said, not because you shrink. That night, I opened an old plastic storage bin in the hall closet. Inside were journals. It's church camp bracelets, a cracked tortoiseshell hair clip, high school debate ribbons, receipts from SAT prep books, and a manila envelope full of things I had kept because younger versions of me understood something older versions tried very hard not to. Evidence matters. even when no one wants it yet. Inside was a birthday card from my mother after the Atlanta job disaster. On the inside, she had written, "Family is the only institution that survives your worst decisions." At the time, I thought it sounded profound. Later, I realized it sounded like a threat in a cardigan. There was also a photocopy of an email I had once found in my father's office trash. He had written about me to someone at that old company. Emotionally ambitious, but structurally unreliable. But I had kept it because even then the phrasing felt too cold to forget. Then, between a DMV change of address slip and old church program inserts, I found the document that made Martin sit back in his chair and go very still. A church counseling consent form, dated when I was 20, legally an adult. The parent-guardian notification signature line had been signed by my mother. Not me, not authorized. Her. One line on one old piece of paper cracked open a decade. The counseling center would not release more now, but they didn't have to. The pattern was suddenly visible in black ink. Martin read it twice. Then he looked up. "This establishes pattern," Nora, beside him, said, "and obsession." Then the ally I never expected stepped out of the shadows. Marisol Vega had managed my parents' household for more than a decade. Vendors, holiday deliveries, dry cleaning, flowers, caterers. She knew where the bodies were buried emotionally, if not literally. She texted me from an unknown number. "Can we meet somewhere public?" I almost didn't go. Then I did. We met at a diner 20 minutes away. She sat in the booth with both hands around a mug of tea like she needed the heat to stop herself from leaving. "I shouldn't be here," she said. "Then why are you?" Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. "Because your mother told me to shred something," she said, "and I couldn't." She slid a sealed envelope across the table. Inside were partial printouts of mock message threads, a receipt for rush photo editing, and one page from what looked like a draft affidavit accusing me of fraudulent inducement of marriage. The language was clumsy, formal, vicious. At the bottom, in my father's handwriting, was a note. "If Caleb hesitates, push mental instability angle." My hands started shaking, not wildly, fine tremors, the kind your body makes when rage is trying to remain elegant enough to finish the meeting. "Why save this?" I asked. Marisol looked down at her tea. "Because I have daughters." Then she gave us one more name. Aunt Linda. Not as mastermind, not as strategist, as accessory, feeding my mother guest list details, opening church gossip channels, supplying names of who might need to be gently prepared. That was the thing nobody tells you about family betrayal. It is rarely a solo act. It is a choir, and everybody learns their harmony line. By then, my parents had already announced that the rehearsal dinner would still proceed as a small family evening, while Caleb and I worked through stress, which meant they intended to stand in front of our future witnesses and perform dignity, concern, and injured love. We decided not to stop them. We decided to let them finish building the stage. The dinner was held in the ballroom of the country club with cream linen, floating candles, floral centerpieces, and old money aspiration trying very hard to pass as family tradition. My mother wore navy silk. My father wore a gray suit and the face he reserved for funerals, church panels, and donor events. Aunt Linda hugged me too tightly and whispered that everyone was praying for clarity. Clarity was coming, just not the version she meant. And I wore a pale blue dress my mother hated because once she told me it made me look less refined than happy. Good. I wanted to look like myself. Before we went in, Caleb squeezed my hand once. Not to lead me, not to rescue me, just to say he was still there. That mattered. Inside, the room buzzed with polished voices and clinking glasses. My parents stood near the floral arrangement, welcoming people like hosts at a charity benefit. I heard my mother say, "It's been a difficult week, but family carries each other." She almost looked holy. I let her have 10 more minutes. Then Caleb tapped his fork against his water glass. Not theatrically, not enough to announce a performance, just enough. Heads turned. My mother smiled automatically, expecting toast energy. My father's eyes narrowed first. He understood tone. He understood risk. Caleb stood. Before dinner starts, he said, Emily and I need to address something. You could feel the room shift, small at first, then all at once. I stood beside him and unfolded one sheet of paper. My hands were steady. That surprised everyone except me. Some of you, I said, have been told there are concerns about me. Concerns involving fidelity, money, medical history, and honesty. Those claims are not misunderstandings. They are manufactured. A whisper ran through the room. My mother rose halfway out of her chair. Emily, she said sharply, smiling for the crowd, this is not the place. I looked at her. You chose the place. Then I lifted the first exhibit, the fake photo. This image was sent anonymously to my fiancé 3 days ago. It is edited. Metadata analysis and comparative review show the original was taken at a charity event in 2023. The man pictured with me was digitally inserted. I handed copies to the nearest tables, watched them pass from manicured hand to manicured hand. Then I held up the forged medical document. This form contains an outdated clinic logo, the name of a retired physician, and an old address pulled from restricted personal records. It is false. My father stood up. Enough. I turned toward him. No, I said. Not yet. Caleb stepped slightly closer. Not in front of me. Beside me. Always beside me. That mattered more than anyone in that room understood. Then Martin rose from the back table, where he had arrived quietly 10 minutes earlier, and sat through the opening like a man waiting for timing instead of drama. And for the record, he said, I am counsel on related trust and documentation matters. Multiple items presented tonight establish a pattern of unauthorized access, record manipulation, and potential fraud exposure. My mother went white around the mouth. Aunt Linda looked like she wanted the centerpiece to swallow her whole. Then Marisol stood. Most people in that room had never truly seen her before. Not really. That changed fast. Mrs. Russo told me to shred drafts, she said. Silence didn't fall. It tightened. There is a difference. Marisol held up the photo editing receipt, then the draft threads, then the affidavit page. I kept copies, she said, because I knew it was wrong. My father took one step toward her. You're lying. Marisol didn't even blink. You wrote, if Caleb hesitates, I push mental instability angle. That did it. Gasps now, real ones, no more polite shifting, no more uncertain smiles, no more maybe there's an explanation energy. The room had crossed over. My mother turned toward my father too fast. A crack, just one. But enough. She had expected control, not witnesses. I unfolded the final document. And since motive matters, I said, here is the part they never intended me to see. I held up the trust supplement. My grandfather's trust included distributions tied to my marital status and independent household formation. My parents had financial incentive to prevent my marriage and preserve control over assets linked to my name. A murmur spread low and fast through the room. Country club people love morality until money walks in wearing facts. Then they wake up. But my father's face changed. That was the first time all night I saw naked hatred instead of managed authority. That is private family business, he said. I looked at him. You made my body, my name, and my future public business. My mother found her voice again. We were protecting you. I turned toward her. From what? She opened her mouth. Nothing clean came out. So I gave her what she had never once given me. Precision. You were not protecting me from a bad man, I said. You were protecting your access, your image, your management rights over a daughter you never allowed to become fully adult in your eyes. Then I looked at the room. At the church, women wearing pearls and sympathy like armor. At the cousins suddenly studying their napkins. At Aunt Linda blinking too much. Just at the men from the finance committee who were now paying very close attention because the word trust had entered the conversation, and money has a way of restoring concentration. My parents did not raise me to be safe, I said. They raised me to be governable. That line landed exactly the way truth does, when half the room has lived some version of it, and the other half has benefited from it. My father tried one last move. Emily has always been dramatic. Caleb answered before I could. He didn't raise his voice, didn't grandstand, didn't perform heroics. He just said, I'm a litigator. I know dramatic. This is evidence. Then Martin placed one more sheet on the head table, cleanly, almost casually. County Clerk, he said, petition for emergency review of trust-related disclosures and preservation of relevant records. Filed this afternoon. That was the sound my parents feared most. Not anger, not moral judgment. Paper. My mother sat down so hard her chair shifted. Aunt Linda started crying, which irritated me more than either of my parents' expressions did. My father looked at her, then at my mother, then back at me. And for the first time in my life, there was no strategy left on his face, only exposure. You're doing this in front of everyone, he said. I held his eyes. You started in private because you thought I would stay ashamed. And then the most beautiful thing happened. No one came to save them. There was no public attack, no applause, no dramatic cheering, just distance, immediate, instinctive. The church women who had entertained my mother's concerns stopped making eye contact. One finance committee man folded his exhibit packet and slipped it into his jacket, like he already knew he would need a record of where he stood when this went bad. A cousin left the room. Another whispered Jesus under his breath, not as prayer, but as diagnosis. My mother tried one final reframing attempt. Families handle things with grace. I looked at her. Grace without accountability is just polished permission. That line was for me as much as for her. Because sometimes you say the truth out loud so your own body can finally hear it. The dinner didn't explode. It collapsed. Slowly, elegantly, like a rotten floor under expensive carpet. No glasses shattered, no one screamed. My father walked out first. My mother stayed seated, staring at the floral arrangement as if roses might testify differently. Aunt Linda reached for my arm in the confusion. I moved before she could touch me. Later, in the parking lot under the yellow wash of clubhouse lights, I stood next to Caleb and let the night air hit my bare shoulders. Somewhere beyond the lot, kids in another neighborhood were setting off leftover 4th of July fireworks. Little pops in the dark. A catering server wheeled out a cart stacked with untouched bread baskets. A sprinkler system kicked on across the lawn. Life doesn't stop because you finally tell the truth. It just keeps offering weather. My mother called 12 times over the next 2 days. My father called 0. That was his method. Silence as punishment. Silence as power. Silence as a room he thought I would eventually crawl back into and apologize for leaving. I didn't. Martin filed follow-up preservation notices. Caleb helped me change passwords, lock down recovery devices, document suspected mail interception, and secure every account attached to my name. Nora found an old family iPad still listed as a backup recovery point on one of my email accounts. My mother had never stopped trying doors. Not one door, every door. The trust matter moved into formal review. My father's financial maneuvers drew scrutiny he had spent years working to avoid. Marisol found another job within a week. I paid her first month's rent deposit myself in the parking lot outside a UPS store in a strip mall, and she cried into my shoulder while trying to apologize for crying. Aunt Linda sent a 6-paragraph email about fear, misunderstanding, prayer, and family bonds. I deleted it in the second paragraph. There are seasons for explanation, and there are seasons for locks. Caleb and I were not magically untouched by any of it after that. He apologized more than once, not in a grand speech, in quieter ways that mattered more. When he admitted exactly where doubt entered, when he told people plainly that he had been targeted too, when he stopped trying to make what happened sound cleaner than it was. One night, we sat cross-legged on the floor of the half-packed guest room, surrounded by registry gifts, extra towels, unopened kitchen gadgets, and a blender nobody needs unless they are running a smoothie cult. The lease for our new place sat between us. Signed, the move-in date circled. I held the edge of the paper between my fingers and breathed. "Are you still sure?" he asked. "About what?" He looked at me. About marrying me." I didn't answer immediately. That mattered, because after a lifetime of being managed, deliberate choice feels sacred. Finally, I said, "I'm sure I do not need marriage to escape them." He stayed quiet, waiting, listening. "I'm choosing it because I want a life with you," I said. "Not because I need a witness to prove I survived." His eyes filled. He laughed once under his breath like he was embarrassed by how much that hit him. "That," he said softly, "is the best thing anyone's ever said to me." I smiled then, a small one, tired, real, earned. Some endings are not revenge stories. Not exactly. They are ownership stories. The wedding happened 6 weeks later. Smaller, cleaner, no country club, no polished family theater. We booked a renovated brick venue near the river with folding wooden chairs, string lights, and a taco truck parked outside, because at that point, both of us were too old and too angry to pretend elegance and worth were the same thing. Caleb's niece spilled Sprite on a groomsman. My college friends screamed during the dance songs. Nora wore emerald satin and looked like she could hack heaven if needed. My parents were not there. Neither was Aunt Linda. I thought their absence might feel like grief. What it felt like was quiet. Not dead quiet, not aching quiet, clean quiet, the kind that lets you hear your own life beginning. After the ceremony, I stepped outside alone for 1 minute. Just one. The air smelled like summer pavement, river damp, grilled corn from the taco truck, and somebody's vanilla perfume trailing out the door behind me. Across the street, one apartment balcony still had Christmas lights hanging in July. Stubborn, a little tacky, weirdly perfect. I looked down at my hands. Same fingers, different life. For years, I thought freedom would feel dramatic. A slammed door, a final speech, a clean, cinematic break. It didn't. Freedom felt smaller than that. And stronger. It felt like opening my own mail and knowing no one had steamed it first. It felt like changing emergency contacts and realizing the word emergency no longer meant family. It felt like trusting my own memory without needing corroboration. It felt like peace arriving in ordinary clothes. My parents lost more than reputation. They lost authorship. They no longer got to write me as unstable, ungrateful, difficult. Too emotional, too naive, too dependent, too something. They had always needed me blurry, because a clear daughter is hard to manage, and I am very clear now. People ask sometimes whether I forgave them. That is not the first question. The first question is whether I believed myself, whether I trusted what I had seen, what I had lived, what my body had known for years, while my mouth kept trying to make it sound smaller. The answer is yes. Now I do. That changed everything. Months later, paperwork still moved, reviews still happened, financial records were still being examined. The trust issue did not magically turn into a neat little bow, because real life is rude like that. My father kept trying to delay. My mother kept trying to soften. One sent silence, the other sent language. Neither one moved me. Sometimes my mother left voicemails that sounded almost human, not manipulative, not polished, just tired. Those were the hardest to hear, because the truth is, monstrous people are rarely monsters all the time. Sometimes they are just damaged people who became organized around control and called it love until they believed themselves. But damage does not erase consequence, and tenderness does not erase design. So I listened. Then I saved the voicemails. Then I kept walking. Caleb and I moved into the new place. The first week there, I kept waiting for fear to come find me in some new shape. It didn't. There were boxes in every room, a shower curtain that refused to stay hooked, a lamp we assembled wrong twice, takeout cartons on the counter, a smoke alarm that chirped at 3 in the morning because apparently even peace needs maintenance. I loved it. I loved how uncurated it was, how unblessed, how unsermonized. No one asked for access. No one asked for passwords. No one asked if I was sure about what I remembered. We built routines, tiny ones, morning coffee, shared grocery lists, keys in the same bowl, Sunday laundry. The kind of ordinary life I used to think was too small to count. It counts. It counts more than spectacle ever did. One evening, months after the wedding, I found myself standing in the kitchen barefoot, eating leftover cake with a fork straight from the container while Caleb argued with a stubborn cabinet hinge. The window was open. A neighbor's wind chime kept catching the breeze. And I had this strange, sudden realization that no one was coming to reinterpret me. No one was going to call and say I was unstable. No one was going to reach into my future and rename it concern. No one was standing just outside the frame preparing a better version of me for public use. I leaned against the counter and cried then. Not hard, not dramatically. Just a quiet spill of relief my body had postponed until it knew the room was safe. Caleb looked up, saw my face, and immediately straightened. Hey, I laughed and wiped my cheeks. I'm okay. You sure? I nodded. Then I said the truest thing I had said in a while. I think this is what safe feels like. He didn't answer right away, just came over, put one hand at the back of my neck, rested his forehead lightly against mine, and stayed there, no fixing. And no speech, just presence. That is how healing actually sounds most of the time. Not wisdom, not music, not speeches that go viral. A hinge half fixed, a fork in cake, a quiet yes. I do not know what version of me my parents tell themselves about now. Maybe I am still the daughter led astray. Maybe I am the cold one, the punishing one, the dramatic one who made family business public. Maybe they tell a softer version where they were scared and loved me badly. Maybe all of those stories take turns. It no longer matters the way it used to, because they are no longer writing the copy I live inside. I am. And that is the part I wish someone had told me earlier. Freedom is not always escape. Sometimes freedom is authorship. Sometimes it is the moment you stop defending your memory to people committed to misreading it. Sometimes it is changing passwords, filing papers, deleting emails, letting a silence stay unanswered. Sometimes it is standing in a room full of people trained to doubt you and speaking anyway. And sometimes it is much quieter than that. Sometimes it is a pale blue dress, a river venue, a taco truck, a hand beside yours instead of in front of you, a life that doesn't need to look impressive to be real. My name is Emily. I'm 28 years old. My parents tried to end my wedding with forged documents, old records, polished lies, and a plan built on the assumption that shame would do the rest. They were wrong. Not because I outperformed them, not because I screamed louder, not because I became cruel enough to win. They were wrong because eventually I got clear, and once a woman like me gets clear, the whole architecture starts to shake. I used to think justice would feel triumphant. What it actually felt like was quieter, stronger, cleaner. Like opening a door in my own house and realizing every room belongs to me now. Like breathing without waiting to be corrected. Like peace, real peace. Not the decorative kind, the kind you build yourself. And that, it turns out, is harder to steal than they ever imagined.